So like more on how the gay rights movement sucks and is like everything wrong in the world. Has anyone else noticed that like with all these like supposed gay victories, we've seen an attack on like reproductive justice in this country? Like lols. And like gay men are just like progress, equality, but then they like never give a shit about feminism. And it's kind of like when it's convenient, gay men will be like, I'm a feminist. But then like when it actually comes to developing an analysis of like misogyny, gay men are like kind of silent. So this poem's about gay male misogyny.
Patriarchy.
Patriarchy. You were 5 years old when you touch a vagina for the first time. And you're trying to figure out the mechanics of a body in a world where birth certificates do not come with instruction manuals, so instead, you just play show and tell during recess. You can still remember the coolness of her skin. Years later, your first girlfriend will invite you inside of her, but you cannot bear the darkness in between her legs, that cave you crawled out of once on a night much like this. So you called yourself gay. Use that word to protect you from her wants, from her desire. Wipe off the cum from her chest as she wipes off her tears. Say, I'm sorry, I just can't help it. I was born this way, to be a patriarch. And you have not seen another naked woman in years, except for the one that slipped into your favorite porn film, the one where two men fuck one another and call each other pussies, except for that pair of breasts you grabbed that night at the gay bar, told her that she was gorgeous and that she deserved any man, except for some reason you were not eligible because the only part of her body that mattered to you was her makeup, so that you could use it to have a kiki with all of your girls but her. The TV is running. America declares war on women, cannot bear the darkness between her legs, so prescribes laws to keep it shut, cannot bear its nudity, its honesty, its blood, its creativity. Hey girl, where were you last night when Wendy Davis, when body degraded, when pleasure made illegal, too busy getting gay married, telling stories about accepting mothers who let you wear pink when you were 15 and started fucking boys, mistook misogyny for love. Hey girl, did you ask her how hard he hit her? Institutionalized rape and called it marriage. Institutionalized slavery and called it mother. Hey girl, how many women did it take to make you equal? How many women did it take to make you fierce? Hey girl, how many women do you even have in your fucking phone book? Hey girl, the government wants you to get gay married so you can drive past the abortion clinics to the altar so that you can make more babies, to make more soldiers, to make more politicians, to make more rapists, to make her nothing, to make her forgotten, to make her illegal. Hey girl, hey. So I write about this a lot, but I grew up in a small town in Texas, and it's really funny to like move to New York, where like everyone's an activist, and you're just sort of like, shit, I'm no longer unique. But then what you begin to recognize is that like, if there were really this many activists, like why don't people show up for shit? Oh, wait, it's because like there's hipsters. And like hipster radicalism is some of the worst because it's people who like went to private school and like learned the really sexy analysis and think that that's enough. And so this is a poem about that, and how activist culture, as it's been defined, is really devoid of any actual action, and it's just about this cool politic, right? An autobiography of an activist revised. This is not an origin story. This is not a trapped in the wrong body. This is not a detailed ethnography of the lisp, the sway, the closet. This is not a history of faggot, terrorist, sodomite, and all those other fingers tattooed around your throat. This is no longer about you. You, the 22-year-old self-proclaimed performance artist who speaks your mind in public when it's not too controversial, whose favorite word is colonization, which you serve at cafes built on occupied land, flirting with other radical activists who give you bell hooks quotes to recycle on your Facebook profile sometimes. Oops, forgot to tip the waiter because a girl's got to afford that hashtag rent and hashtag Brooklyn. The hashtag struggle is real sometimes. You are no longer a victim. Tell it to yourself as you check all the boxes. You, the model minority edit, diversity edit, affirmative action edit. I'm just trying to dismantle the system from within. Call it brown to get away with it for the fellowship application at least. This is no longer about about you. This is not a romantic account of your first kiss, your first love, your first heartbreak. We are no longer interested in the boys who won't fuck you or your flamboyant outfits, the ones that consist of the clothing you thrifted from the women's section to look more provocative and curious for the boys who won't fuck you because you're so goddamn provocative and curious. This is no longer about you. Tell it to yourself as you laugh at all the uneducated, unenlightened, un-you people. Call it rich, call it white, call it anybody but you people. Getting gay married, getting gay not like you. This is no longer about you. In fact, this was never about you. You, the deepen your voice, the wipe off your lipstick, the come out as genderqueer after taking your first queer studies class at your private university, use theory to justify it all, fluidity, fashion, fun. This is no longer about you. So who is the victim? So who do we save now? Last week, they ran a story on how hard it was for you to grow up in small-town Texas. Tell about that time in first grade, the same day you learned gender, the same day the other boys in your class learned how to discipline their tongues into silence and hearts into fists. Tell them how they almost beat you, but do not mention that time that they called her a slut, and you said nothing because you wanted them to fuck you. We swore that this is no longer about you. But why not? What about? Next week, they're running a story on how conservative the South Asian diaspora is. Tell about that one time he said, she said, you felt. Tell about how hard it was for you to come out of your 3,000 square foot house. Use words like honor and collectivism if you're feeling particularly edgy and or post-colonial, but do not mention the women in your family who have no closets to come out of because they are full of discarded baggage from men just like you. They say that you have your father's scowl. Does that mean that you share his fist? We swear this is no longer about you. This is about the movement. Last week, at the Radical Queer Trans POC Fetish Me conference, you gave a great talk on how difficult it is for you to manage your multiple romantic friendships and how you're trying to envision a love that is so radical. It is post-queer, post-anti-capitalist, post-Marxist, and they gave you a juicy honorarium for your groundbreaking work because it's going to allow you to take the hashtag revolution home and do some hashtag much-needed self-care, but do not mention how you composed that speech on your Mac laptop after cuddling with that boy in your apartment, the one that you can only afford from giving speeches that you do not practice with him because he would not understand, because he's not as radical as you would like him to be. I mean, not as oppressed as you would like him to be. We swear this is no longer about you. This is about you, God damn it. Tell it to yourself as you run across the world and spit poems to audiences of strangers who might even snap for you and clap for you and call you provocative and curious. This is no longer about you. You were never a victim. You were no longer a victim. So who are you now?
There's still seats. You should come to the front. Thank you. We sometimes joke that we could do a whole show about our moms, and we totally could. I'm totally serious about people coming to the seats. But anyway, the next two poems are about my mom. My mother's heels start cracking 22 years ago. After I claw my body from hers and the weight of childbirth starts splitting second and third wombs at the backs of her feet. My mother's heels are split like torn fingernails. Every night, she rubs the cracks down in coconut oil. When I am a little girl, my mother always cuts my fingernails with sewing scissors, down to the quick. My mother cannot sew. I ask her each time why she insists on cutting my nails until they bleed at the edges, like she remembers being scratched, like how farmers will clip a beak, like how dogs will claw the cat. I remember cutting my nails the way other little girls remember waxing, all the red and the sting and the baby finish. My mother says sorry with coconut oil dripping from her fingertips to mine. My grandmother says that fingernails on the floor are an invitation to death in your house when I am 6, and my nails are interrupting my basement games of solitaire. I tear one off and let it clank to the floor like the binding of a ghost. Let my edges bleed into the arrow keys. Say sorry to myself in coconut oil when I come upstairs for air. When my grandfather dies, when I am 6, I can feel the guilty knotted in my stomach like the fingernails tangled somewhere in our Missouri basement carpet. My mother's heels gather dust and nails as she bleeds around our house. When she bleeds, she is not allowed to touch my grandfather's altar. Blood makes my mother unholy. I stop bleeding when I needle and drug away my womanhood willingly, which means that I am always holy but never home long enough to find my grandfather's altar. 3,000 miles away, in my sunny apartment, I let boys and fingernails in and across the wooden floor and hope that one of them will come up death and kill the little girl who still laughs inside. At my mother's home, I keep my eyes closed so I will not catch her wounded heels. So I will not see ghostly little girls slipping in and swishing out of her feet. My mother has wombs in her feet that will not close. I wish that my mother could sew. When I tell my mother how long I have been sitting with the shiftiness of a female body, she cries a million kind of monsoon tears. She tells me about the white men who colonized her land, her nightmares, her mother's sorry soaked in salt water, the traumas she screams about. And this is the face I remember when I speak to white trans men and witness the million different ways they take up space in my community and speak for trans women of color and treat femmes as arm candy and do not own their position as white men brothers. What I mean is, you think the M in FTM stood for misogyny. What I mean is, what about your female socialization did you think gave you a free pass at patriarchy? What I mean is, I understand that your bodies have not always been yours, but they have always been beautiful. You have always had words for them. My testosterone is now made by Israel's largest company. There is colonization running through my bloodstream. Every time I take a shot, my muscles feel out of place for several days, but there is some perverse satisfaction in this, that even in my body, masculinity takes up too much space. Mom, you're right. This is a painful process. It is violent. It is scarring. But I am trying to believe in something greater, that there are ways of being a man that do not involve being a white man. When I tell my grandmother I am finally ready to be honest with my body, she says, okay, but make sure to call me more often. And I am sending you a drum set. For days I have no idea what she means. Then I realized that in India, only the boys ever play the drums, and what my grandmother means is, there are ways of being a man that do not involve being an American man, that you can still play your music with us. That I do not have words for this process of your becoming, but I will work around it with art and love. Grandmother, Mom, there is a way to do this ethically. I will build some other new old kind of masculinity. I will not worry about the words for it in English. I will honor the mothers in my history, the goddess in my name. I will play the drums for you.
I love my India, ya mera India. In second grade, I danced my favorite Bollywood song, and what I now understand to be drag. After the entire auditorium laughed at my ass, my mom told me that she loved me, the way that Indians tend to. No words, just the chai ready for us on the stove, hissing and frothing like the brownest parts of us. The warmth in our chest loosely translates into family in English. A couple of months ago, I wore a dress, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was in drag. I've never felt more comfortable in my own body than in rainbow lace and bows. Honey, I was giving you some Little House on the Prairie. Some, come over to my house, let's play Oregon Trail. I know the damn wagon is broken down, but at least we are still fabulous, girl. I call my mom to tell her the news, except this time there was no warmth in her silence. She tells me I need to be a little bit more quiet, less visible, more family, less individual. Mom, I think that you are right. There are parts of me that are becoming white in this country, and I think that I like it. Me, the boy who goes to poetry schools and screams, "Fuck white supremacy," and does it by crawling back into bed with a white man after the show. The same man whose smile gives me more affirmation than your phone calls, whose cum on my face works something like a skin whitening cream, whose dick and my ass works something like a plunger, pulling out the brownest parts out of me slowly, Mom. I have been taught to pledge allegiance to the American fag. He who has taught me that coming out means wearing this dress and thinking that that's radical politics means leaving you and our family and our culture and finding revolution for myself only and thinking that that is enough, Mom. Let me apologize with a cup of chai. I've forgotten the recipe, but maybe you can help me remember how when you sprinkle in those white grains of sugar and stir hard enough, they become brown. The perseverance of our people, how your fierceness does not require lace or makeup, but rather love and masala, Mom. I am 22 years old and I'm still refusing to become a man because I just want to be half the Indian woman you are, so maybe you can teach me how to tie a sari this time. So maybe we can cry together this time. And our tears will be just what we needed to make this all right.
I have a confession. I have this insatiable addiction to coffee.
Fair trade coffee.
Fair trade coffee in NPR membership clubs. I want to wake up to that smell next to me. That, and freshly pressed New Yorkers, and moleskin covers, and sweaty yoga mats.
See, the truth is,
I'm a snow queen.
I just have this thing.
For white people, can't help it. It's the way they eat steak for dinner. I know I'm a vegetarian, but I would make exceptions.
I've heard that white men have huge
Empires.
I've heard they're really good in
Gentrification. Once, a white woman asked me where I was from. No, where I was really from. Then she told me she was going to India with her nonprofit that year. And I said, oh, tell me more. Oh, take me with you. You say you like curry, honey?
The first white boy I slept with was so excited when I told him he was sexy. Like I was the first person to say that. Like ever. In the entire world. That time you randomly selected me from the airport security check line.
I loved that.
And when we're couch surfing together on our first honeymoon night.
I will call you master, because colonialism never had a safe word.
And you will whisper tenderly in my ear.
Don't worry, I'm not racist like them.
Then fuck me like you are!
So this next piece we wrote like 2 days ago, but
So how many of y'all are on OkCupid?
disclosure!
Let's do it.
Oh my god, y'all are liars.
Y'all are so
okay.
closeted. No shame. So like, we've recently entered the OK Silly world, and it's like really weird. Like dating is super weird, and dating while a radical is even weirder.
It's really weird.
Because you're just like, oh my god, there's so many problematic people in the world that I just like didn't know about. Like, I'm sorry that you moved to New York to find your dreams and drink tapioca, but that's like boring. So, yeah.
Anyway,
Here's our poem about OK.
we met each other on OkCupid. It was a 99% match. Hashtag, we are the 99%. I rated him 4 stars on Quick Match because his profile said that he was awkward and shy and didn't really want to be on OkCupid, but his friends made him do it. And I was like, OMG, no way, me too.
It was the About Me section that got me turned on at first. That whole, I'm not actually female or bisexual, I'm queer and trans and destroying the gender binary, unlike all the other Brooklyn hipsters. And I was like, yeah, you get it, girl. I mean, person. Overthrow that OkCupid category industrial complex and then come over to my place for some vegan froyo after.
OkCupid told me to send him a nice message. I had to interrogate whether that really aligned with my consent politics, but I did. It took me a while to craft the perfect combination of flirty and casual. Finally, I settled on, hey, winky face.
I started low-key freaking the fuck out when I got the message. I was so excited, oh my god. But, you know, I noticed in their profile it said that they didn't spend that much time on OkCupid, and like I understand that queer and trans people suffer isolation under capitalism, so they must have really sought me out. So I was like, okay, must have the best response ever. So I opted for, hey.
That message made me really nervous. What if that first winky face was too much? What if they just wanted to be hashtag 85% friends? I mean, I'm radical enough to recognize that friendship and romance aren't different, but OMG, it made me so nervous. I started rambling in the next message.
They started rambling in the next message.
Sorry about that winky face earlier. I really meant colon. Like, I was going to elaborate on how I thought we could process our childhood trauma together and debrief what you meant when you said you were interested in casual sex.
I love it when people proposition me to process. So hot. Your profile says you're into semantics, and you're really showing that. I've got an idea. Why don't you come over later for some vegan, gluten-free, sugar-free, fair trade, workers-owned cooperative, feminist hot chocolate!
That message took me a few months to respond to.
I wondered if I should have included a trigger warning. I call for a community accountability process about my cyber patriarchy.
I really had to hashtag lean in to respond.
Then, out of nowhere, I received a message in April.
Hey, I'd love to get an ethical drink with you sometime. I know it says that I'm vegan on my profile, but I'm down to experiment, winky.
I was like, oh yeah? When and where?
On our first date, we tweeted for hours and pretended that we were texting our moms. My followers told me to make him my hashtag Asian sidekick.
I told him how great it was that we both felt that creationism should not be taught in schools, and that I wish that there was a real life I don't have to see straight people option.
I told him how great it would be if there was a real life I don't want to see white people option.
And it was like, oh my god, me too! And then I asked if we were ever going to stop talking about OkCupid.
I asked them why they were privileging one type of reality over another. That's cyborg shaming.
I didn't hear from them for a couple of months.
After a few months, our match percentage had gone down to 84. Maybe it's because Mercury was in retrograde. Maybe it's because our zodiac signs are a stretch. Maybe it's Maybelline.
Or maybe it's because my iPhone battery died.
What we think about in terms of queer of color digestion politics. But anyway, I lived in a queer of color collective last year where we talked a lot about digestion. It was really important, valuable to me. And one day, one of my housemates brought an article to my attention that was about this thing called poop therapy, right? And so we were talking about how, you know, in the modern colonial capitalist food system, people have all these different gastrointestinal disorders that are caused by colonialism and capitalism, and I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what happens. So she's telling me, yeah, like people are seeking out this treatment called poop therapy, where people who identify as having good digestion will transfer their shit to people who do not. You're nodding, you understand.
Yeah.
And those people will then consume it in tiny capsules, right, to repopulate their internal microflora. Anyway, I thought this was very sweet. And this article is in particular a set of interviews with like friends and lovers who had gone through this very queer, very radical, intimate process. So I decided to write a love poem about it. With the rise of industrial modernity, there is an increasing trend of new and different kinds of GI disorders and a rising trend of lovers donating their shit to each other. This brings important meaning to phrases heard across communities of color such as, "That's white people shit," or "I do not take shit from white people." And I do not take shit from white people, because sharing shit means sharing microflora, which can be an act of decolonial love. It says, I want to populate your insides. I want the world to move through you simple, the way it moves through me. I want you to struggle less. I want you to feel ease. I want us to share an apple and acquire the same knowledge from it. They say that when we are born, we have all the flora that will ever mark our personhood and place. Taking of someone else's flora willingly says, I want to internalize the moment that you were born. That space-time when your skin was hanging between the atmosphere and someone else's vagina, when Orion snipped your umbilical cord, when Leo himself roared into your cry, when Neptune and Pluto were dethroned and Uranus became the final stop in our solar system. I want to know that moment. And think, if you douche before every hookup, honey, it is not because there is something filthy about the way your body works, but indeed, you do not need the unloving people who fuck you to have access to your origin story. Microflora whisper more about our histories than we ever do in bed. They are the kin we carry with us always. They die when we are disempowered. Which is why I do not take shit from white people, or from anyone who doesn't know how to love me.
These next few poems are about state violence, which Jenny and I have a lot of trepidation talking about, because we name ourselves as like South Asian folks who are often able to privilege from the term people of color. What gets lost in that framework is the specificity of anti-black racism, anti-native racism, and racism against low-income people of color, specifically around state violence and incarceration. So like shout out to our comrades from Black and Pink who are here today, because we both identify as prison abolitionists, and we think an analysis of prison is central to all the work that we do. And as people who have actually benefited from systems of incarceration, we can't ever say that we've been directly afflicted by it. But these next two poems are thinking about race in more complicated ways beyond just people of color. There's a block off the C train in Brooklyn, in that place that I'm learning how to build home out of frantic conversations at parties and too many potluck dinners. What is your name? What do you do? Will you love me? With far too many tofu dogs and fake glasses and secondhand smoke, where we all talk about how different we are from all the other white people in our neighborhood. Use our skins as masks as we rob the banks right beside them. Last night, an elderly black man downstairs knocked on our door, said we were booming music every night, right? Said we're happy he didn't call the cops, right? That the rent was so high, right? So we promised we'd turn off the music. In our naivety, said sorry, we'd try better next time. We went to sleep that night, refusing to think about who lived in these homes before we stole them and called them home. The violence of falling in love with something that does not belong to you. How do you remember a connectivity before possession in this neighborhood of haunted houses whose memories are being erased not only because we whitewashed them from the streets, but because we hid them behind our new coffee shops and vegan diets, forgot that we left them there to wilt alone. I do not know that man's name. Like, I do not know the name of the woman at the laundromat who folds her clothes next to me. Like, I do not know the name of the 6 black men who gawk at me as I walk home wearing gender like a foreign language. Like, I do not know the name of the man I got stopped by the police. But I wish I did. Even though I probably wouldn't have asked him at the corner store, his body only noticeable after it has already been locked up. A handcuff is a border between invisible and compassion. These anonymous faces, these walking statistics, only visible after they are already painted in murals, after they have been exterminated. What I mean is, gentrification is a neighborhood-wide pest surveillance program administered by the police, and sometimes I do not know if I'm being chased or whom I'm running out. Last week, a police officer tipped off his hat at me as I dashed back home. My queer, convenient for his language of racism says, protect me from the black man on the corner screams, protect me, my gender identity is my private property along with my iPhone and my apartment, protect me says, what is the irony of a brown that colonizes, of a queer that gentrifies, of a radical that knows the name to theorists but not her own neighbors? A theory is a border between two beating hearts, and I went around downstairs and tell the man that I spent my summer in Palestine, and there's a wall that's followed us across the ocean and divided the city into a fractured lung. So when you say that the rent is too high, what I think you are meaning to say is that we are all having difficulty breathing in this city where there's a wall in between Manhattan and Brooklyn, like Jerusalem and Ramallah. For every good city, a bad ghetto. For every developed nation, a backwards third world. For every white prep school kid smoking pot, a black criminal. For every gay victory, a brown death. But we do not talk about it. Because there's a wall that has divided our conversations, like the highways of Israel, the US, where we don't even actually notice that anything is wrong because we are only taking the roads they have built for us. There's a wall in between the deepest parts of us. There's a border in between you and me. There's a border between strangers on the subway. An apartment floor is a border between two potential friends. So, apartheid. It's not just about racial segregation, Wall Street, and our rent prices. It is also about the silence between strangers. It is also about the distance between hello and how are you doing. It's the fact that we 22-year-olds, something-year-olds all moved to this city to be free of something, but ironically, we are finding ourselves in cages that are even more heartbreaking because we know that we built them ourselves.
As a deeply committed nerd, I like to think about the ways that fantasy and fiction and science fiction and all these things reinscribe narratives of power. And in particular, the trend in monster movies and in monster narratives where white people have recentered themselves as victims, right? And in particular, I've been thinking about The Walking Dead and my inability to watch it and how that is related to narratives of victimhood and state violence and how they've happened. A few weeks ago, I watched The Walking Dead for the first time. Watched a white man chain himself to a fence, watched him wait for his death among the undead. I turned away, not for blood, but for some other fear that stretches its canvas farther across time. I've started seeing little pieces of dead walk inside too many bodies on these streets. Yesterday, I watched a Sikh man leave the subway, wanted to stick my eyes to him, wanted to tell him, brother. I watched too much of the news, and now I am watching too much of you, and now I am waiting for the dead inside of you to come alive. Today, I watched a line of black and brown mothers lead a march on the NYPD who murdered their children, and after the march was over, I wanted to mourn the ones whose deaths are yet to come. On TV, the zombies are white, the zombies settle in. The Walking Dead are the ones who are not chained, are the ones who are not colonized, are the ones who are not strung up in their homelands by their feet. Not everyone can be a victim, not everyone's death can be remembered, not everyone can be a ghost. White supremacy has always turned its ghosts into the chains, made its dead into foot soldiers. It has always relied on armies and armies of zombies. The Pilgrims' exclusion becomes the wretched North American winter, becomes the settlement, becomes the genocide. The Holocaust becomes the haunted backdrop of Zionism, becomes Israel, becomes the Nakba, becomes the wall. Every curriculum will tell you about Hitler, but few will whisper the name Leopold in equal breath. Orange, white is the new black. Matthew Shepard becomes hate crimes legislation, becomes a set of rainbow prison bars, becomes the continued legacy of slavery. 9/11 becomes two beams in the Manhattan sky stretching to a place far, far away, becomes the drones that we drop there. Halloween will be next week, when we will paint the town red and paint the ghosts white. Though I imagine that in the real afterlife, though some of the ghosts are white, most of the restless are not.
So there's this way in which non-black people of color like to legislate fuck white people, and we're totally here for that, and yeah. But I think what we do when we do that is that we often don't think about our own complicity in anti-black racism, and specifically in the state violence of continued slavery against black folks and also genocide of Native American folks in this country. And we displace culpability towards white people all the time. So this conversation is specifically directed towards the non-black people of color in the audience, and how we can think about ways to talk about our own diasporas and our own histories within the context of racial formation in this country. There's a photo back home on the fridge at me at maybe 8 or 9. I'm wearing a matching plaid tie and cardigan and a pair of dimples. This is the kind of photo my family has selected for commemoration because it reminds grown-ups of words like innocence. The type of photo you can mail across the ocean and say, look how happy we are here, we made it. This photo was taken during my elementary school's Living History Museum, which is this really weird event that they made all the little kids pretend to be some famous dead person. We'd stand statue still until our families came by and pressed our button. Then we'd come to life and narrate our stories. I selected Martin Luther King, so when the white families came by and pressed my button, I said something like, long ago this country used to be racist, but then I came along and made it better. And they all laughed and clapped and smiled, and my parents took this photo and put it on the fridge, said I did a good job, and I believed them. So, in 2nd grade, when Beatrice was suspended for bringing a knife to cut her pear, the same day my math teacher told me I might be a genius. So, after 9/11, when I found myself equally brown and ashamed, the same day my Hindu temple said proud to be an American. So, when I became the darkest face in all of my advanced classes, the same day there was a shooting at the school next door. My father taught me how to tie a tie and recite our pledge of assimilation. Long ago this country used to be racist, but then we came along and made it better. When you rinse brown across a blue ocean, does it get lighter or darker? Your choice. In 1958, my grandfather moved to the US to study English at Harvard. I wonder what his colleagues wrote in his letters of recommendation, how remarkable it was for a man to emerge from a fractured lung mistaken as country and breathe English so poetically. Footnote, why can't the black speak like that too? In 1964, the Civil Rights Act banned discrimination against racial minorities in the United States. Footnote, when you throw a piece of paper at a pool of blood, who wins? In 1965, the Immigration Act gave preferential treatment to immigrants with skills. Footnote, bring in brown to keep black down. And my grandfather tells me that he always had a lot of respect for Martin Luther King and was sad to hear the news of his assassination. But I've never asked him if he left his library to the streets, because I know the answer, the way I know my people, the way we are too busy reading rather than revolting, the way we will develop theories about revolution for someone else to fight, the way we've been disciplined to keep quiet and smile back when the white man said jump, we said, how many grades? Said, keep quiet, we said, yes sir, whatever you say, master, said, work harder, so we had to cheat just to keep up, stole the words straight from their tongue, said, hello, my name is Martin Luther King, and I have a dream that one day Asian Americans will appropriate the black struggle for their own advancement and then blame all other people of color for not working as hard. So 50-something years later, this model minority uses a scantron as a mirror, recognizes that his body has already always been filled in as the answer. Press my button. Bring in brown to keep black down. When I talk about how the British colonized my people, but do not mention that they gave some of us their ties, titles, and guns, and we used all three against our own, hid the blood beneath the brown. Bring in brown to keep black down, when I cry about diaspora and missing the homeland, but do not mention about how my family came here for more power. Do not mention the countless numbers of bodies we stepped on just to get closer to kneel for a white man. Dick or degree, is there a difference? Carry both on your tongue. Bring in brown to keep black down. When the white man gives us golden medals with one hand, gives them handcuffs with the other, calls us brilliant and overachieving, calls them slow and lazy, asks them why they can't work as hard as us. Bring in brown to keep black down. When I post Facebook statuses about how the prison industrial complex targets all people of color, but do not mention how 1 block away a man with a skin tone 3 bullets darker get arrested by a night 2 shades lighter, what I'm asking you to do is go back home and look at the pictures on the fridge. What images have the privilege of nostalgia? In one photo, Black is forcibly placed on a ship as they put a collar around his neck. In another photo, Brown books the next ship out as they put a tie around his. Long ago, this country used to be racist, but then white people brought us to make it seem better. And we have done little to make them think otherwise since.
Alok and I grew up in Missouri and Texas, respectively, and I think I'm always wary of this narrative that important, sexy things that happen in the country are only happening in like major metropolitan centers like New York. But I live in a major metropolitan center called New York right now. But this is my poem about being from Missouri, thinking about myself as an awkward Midwestern kid. I tell people about cornfields when they ask about Missouri. I give them what they expect. Images of corn stalks breaking sky, but in Missouri, the corn has not broken sky in a long, long time. When I was a little girl, the corn stalks changed from season to season, growing shorter, tighter, springing those extra ears, the ones Van Gogh ripped off and smeared to paint his self-portraits, growing neater. I tell people I lived 5 minutes from Monsanto, that evil doesn't taste so bad up close, that even it looks like gold, that Missouri is this interesting place where things like corn and Monsanto happen. I live in cities with big names now, with boys like me whose haircuts change from season to season like corn stalks. We all live 5 minutes from barbershops. I tell people I go through boys from season to season, that New York is this interesting place where my dreams are going to come true. When New York people ask me about Missouri, my mouth clenches up and I keep talking about corn like I'm chewing on it, laugh about coming from a place where not a whole lot happens. Isn't it funny? This is why I moved to cities with big names, to feel full. In the middle of the show me state, you can drive down Route 66 for hours, catch nothing but mutant corn, then finally a ghost town with nuclear waste tucked right underneath like a gravestone. But a whole town. The power plant melted a few decades ago and they just folded it, like corn stalks. I haven't figured out where my electricity in New York comes from, but I sure do keep the lights on at strange hours. It feels harder in my mouth to make words for emptiness than for corn. Tell people 12 years I spent in a place not a whole lot happened, that there is this state covered in strip malls and cash crops that doesn't make the news until something violent happens, like Lewis and Clark, or a slave compromise, or a rape case, or Monsanto. I tell people in the Midwest we had beautiful autumn leaves that stayed for around a week and a half, and wild tornadoes that were always a couple towns over. And the Pope came in 1996. Missouri is right next to the only fault that's right in the middle of the country, once made the Mississippi River run backwards, woke me up a few times like that jolt that happens between a dream and falling. It's hard to explain what makes New York feel a different kind of empty than the nuclear ghost towns on Route 66, less like spent waste, more like fresh and Lonely Adams. People ask me if I could fall in love here. In Missouri, Love and I never talked. In New York, we had a falling out. Walking is a particular controlled form of falling. In New York, I walk all over to avoid spending dead hours underground on the train. Walking in New York becomes a way of carrying absence about the spaces that form the outlines of my fingers and toes. Like, I don't remember her arms or his warmth, but I can feel the cold air after they've left. And I don't know what stories I told, but I can hear the ringing in my ears, and I spent several minutes not sending them that text. In New York, we are too busy for each other, and sometimes too afraid to admit that we are not. I never said any fussy goodbyes to Missouri, just waved and printed my boarding pass. The toner ran dry that day, so I printed it in red, but I think it scanned all right anyway. I don't think that state will remember me. We're trying to forget about each other, which is easy because we were never in love. It was just mutually tolerant. The language I have for love now is complex and political, but it still doesn't have words for something that is boring, but heavy and difficult. Like the time I spend lying in bed, even though bright lights and eyes tell me to wake the fuck up, somewhere between drinking expensive coffee in Chelsea and drinking expensive coffee in small town Indiana, I hypothesized that there's a roughly equivalent proportion of good and shitty things around the country, that in New York, it's all packed real tight like mutant corn instead of stretched across a long highway yawn, that the empty is approximately equal, that zero is equal to zero, that here feels like acupuncture in my eyes for days, and in Missouri, it stretches over my whole body for 12 years.
That place that is neither here nor there, rarely a destination or vacation, but still finds a way to somehow exist. The gray area. I can give you the directions if you spend a couple of hours tracing the lines of my palms and find Highway 6 and that Toyota Camry we used to drive to the movie theater. The ones where we take all the New Yorkers and make them weep because the movies are only $3.50, baby. Maybe on the way home we can stop by those hay bales we stood on that night of senior year and screamed at the stars because that's what they did in movies, and we wanted some sort of way to make the angst in our chests more intelligible for a world that already had a narrative about what it meant for two boys wearing skinny jeans to grow up in the South. Screaming became a way of resisting how we are compelled into motion. Always taught to leave this place rather than making it work out, taught to forget about it rather than finding joys in the places we've been told to ignore. Remember what it used to feel like to be connected, not by a telephone screen or an iPhone screen, not by an identity or a politics, but by a shared ceiling. Remember, the world used to be one big cuddle party underneath stars. How could you have forgotten? Lately, I've been thinking about my gray area. Those parts of my life that I've had to cut out of my body because there are things that are no longer appropriate to say, like, I grew up in a small town in Texas and it wasn't that bad. Like, most of my friends were conservative, white, straight men, like the type who played Halo and basketball and talked about sports and steak. Like, I've seen the parts of this country that you think are responsible for all of its hatred and prejudice, and I have sometimes even called them neighbor, classmate, handsome, and friends. So I wonder if you displace the most vile parts of yourself, the prejudice, down there in the gray area, so you can feel more liberal and progressive. Wonder if you recycle the same borders on others so that you can make new spaces that you refuse to confront. And when I call my gray area beautiful, this is not the beauty like New York City with its empires of steel and its radical coffee shops and boys wearing vegan diets and bow ties. This is about something far less ostentatious. This is about that local gay bar at 18 that I went with my best white straight guy friend who wore really ugly big white tennis shoes and an old pair of mom jeans that weren't ironic because I didn't want to go alone. And When he dropped me off home, I probably went home and read a bit of science fiction. And I probably texted him, "Thank you." But what I think I was trying to say was, I want to imagine a practice of compassion that is about feeling connected, despite history, despite the news. So lately, I've been thinking about what it would mean to live in my gray area, to invite the most mundane, boring, quotidian, white parts of myself into the movement, like my ears are infected from those places I got earrings to make my gender coherent to you. Gender, like angst, is another form of screaming, like there's plaque accruing at the back of my teeth along with all of the other things I never said to him, like sometimes I find it difficult to sleep at night, not because I'm thinking about revolution, but because I'm wondering why he does not like me, like I do not spend my entire time thinking about the struggle because sometimes I'm thinking about what to eat for dinner, whether or not Nutella or Little Debbie brownies can please be counted as vegan, what to put on my OkCupid profile to seem a little bit less intimidating. So lately, I've been thinking about your gray area. That combination of limb and bone that you hide behind words that you dress yourself with, like radical and brown and queer. Lately, I've been wondering about what it would mean to tell you about my digestion, my lactose intolerance, and all those parts of myself that do not spill into identity, because I want to believe in a type of love that doesn't have to be about identity, because if that's the case, doesn't that mean we've already lost? I want to practice a type of compassion that is like going to that gay bar when I was 18, a sense of open solidarity for being bodies swallowing the sky, for being bodies that are just as capable of loving as we are of hating. And this is not post-racial or post-feminist or post-structural. This is post-us, them, post-cynical, post-trauma. This is about imagining a revolution that is boring, imagining a revolution that is already always here. We are just missing it because we are taking a highway, going somewhere that was never actually meant for us.
So the things, I heard that there was a queer theory class here. I studied queer theory too. But I felt like when I was doing queer and feminist studies, I was writing a lot of papers about my friends, right? And you write like a thesis about your friends and use a lot of academic language. And there was a man who did this for a very long time. His name was Michel Foucault. He was a French philosopher. He wrote a lot of things about his friends. But anyway, he made the statement at one point in an interview that fisting was the best invention of the modern homosexual. And I was like, damn, you must have had a really good time. I just hope it was good for you, but you're doing a lot. Anyway, this is my poem to Michel Foucault. To Michel Foucault, who said that fisting was the best invention of the modern homosexual. What was his name, Michel? I wonder if this is how all you academics do your work. You try something once and then decide that it deserves a monograph. I wonder how you resisted making your anus the repository for all your cleverest puns. Example, the question at hand is whether the rectum is in fact a grave. Example, I wanted my theory and praxis both to go deeper. Example, I wanted to ride the postmodern turn all the way to his second sphincter. Example, the line, "Can I have your digits?" preceded the invention of the modern cell phone.
Oh, yeah.
Was it loving, Michel? Was it your first time, or just the first time it was loving? Did he love you? Or was the fullness only temporary? When I was 16, Michel, I read through all your interviews tenderly. 2 fingers knifing tissue pages, dictionaries splayed open. I wondered if you wrote it with a full hand, like this boy. The one you washed away from your body in discourse. When I reached the end, Michel, I wondered again, is this really the way that freaks learn to take in the violence positioned against them, or was this just the most theoretically fascinating way you could imagine of holding his hand inside?
So what I think we've seen in the past few decades in the left is a move away from an analysis of like economic justice towards like the cultivation of individual radical selves. So now it's seen as radical if you like go and take a queer theory class and you have this like sophisticated analysis, rather than actually building collectives that are about overthrowing corrupt systems. And particularly I've noticed that because there's a lot of people with, quote, radical politics who work at corporate jobs. So awkward. I'm like, what? So this is about that disconnect and how I think actually our schools like create this bifurcation of our professional life and our political life. So we're able to see ourselves as, you know, just like I'm obviously in solidarity with the people from my 9-to-5 corporate job. That's cute. And that there have always been people that have found ways to align these types of trajectories. Remember the first day of freshman year, when you were nothing but a name and a dot on the map at the front of the hall. Remember when our parents dropped us off in those rooms too small for all of our expectations, let alone our naivety. Remember when we did not cry. Remember when you told me that you were not sure, but pretty sure you were going to declare a double major in English and philosophy because we both cried the night we read Perks of Being a Wallflower and we shared a secret and unquestionable lust for bad science fiction. Remember when we both thought that this university was allow us to find ourselves and change the world, and other slogans we memorized from the view books, the ones that we stitched to our throats when they asked us what we wanted to be when we grew up. So when you changed your major to econ, so when you exchanged t-shirt for J. Crew, so when you pledged that fraternity, so when you accepted that job offer at an investment bank because you swore you were different from everyone else and you were just going to dismantle the system from within, I wondered at what point we become the 9-to-5, the wallet and back pocket, the tucked-in shirt we grew up fearing, you whose love of learning far surpassed the stickers your teachers adorned your homework with, you who could not fall asleep that first night of debate camp when you read Marx and the world finally made sense to you again, you who came to this university with a spirit unwilling to be disciplined. What happened to you? You who sacrificed dream for diploma, revolution for resume, and that factory that tries to produce profit out of every potential profit where change falls from hearts into pockets won't really teach you how to stop it because we got to make that endowment rocket. Liberal arts college degree becomes a fancy way of saying, can spend 8 hours designing PowerPoint slides, or can sacrifice all promises and ethics for promotion, or can quote classic literature I read in college to seduce potential business clients. So, what if the best way to dominate a world is to pretend that you are saving it? So, what if this university was really about teaching us how to become so ignorant that we forgot how to think for ourselves? You, the 22-year-old idealist gone corporate in your first suit, throwing theory at a wall that will swallow you up and spit you back out on the street discharged like the cold hard cash of an ATM machine, your heartbeat reduced to a series of transactions. When you hugged me goodbye, I almost expected you to ask me for a receipt, proof of purchase, for a friendship you only consumed when it made sense for your career trajectory. I'm sorry, I did not make the cut for the walking resume you mistake as body, but I want to believe in you, because I want to believe in the power of a creativity undisciplined. The time we read our first book, saw our solar eclipse, saw her smile, the joy and chaos of it all. So what if it is just chaos? Like the dot on the map from freshman year, what if we are nothing? What if that is beautiful? What if we both cried when our parents dropped us off but we did not tell each other? What if I am crying that you are leaving me but I do not have the market value to make you listen? That I think you are worth more than any salary increase that they will give you? That I do not think that your heartbeat can be transcribed onto a spreadsheet of numbers? That I am broke, but not broken, wondering what you could have done before you sold out. So in the spirit of full disclosure, because we're all about that, Jenny and I come up with most of our stuff when we're really sleepy on buses and like dizzy and hungry. And we come up with our own language because English just fails us over and over again. And recently we've come up with this term called B for B, which stands for Babies for Babies. And it's really complex analytic, but we're not going to go into it.
It's like Craigslist.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, okay, but like what I'm using it in this context is B for B is about reclaiming your inner baby and recognizing that we never actually became adults, and the project of becoming an adult is a project of capitalism and colonialism, etc., etc., and that we're all just babies with bodies. And like, and I actually think babies are the sign of like so much of my radical politics. Like babies have figured out how to love and relate in ways that we have so forgotten. And specifically around love, I think we need to remember how to baby love. So this is about that. When I was a kid, my friends used to say, if you love something, then why don't you marry it? So by the age of 8, I was already in a polyamorous relationship with my Nintendo 64, kickball sister, and my favorite substitute teacher. The only one who had the decency to ask me how to pronounce my name. Back then, pronouncements like I do were merely a formality, when love was only a shorthand to describe an invitation for company. Marriage was a word that we threw around like a paper airplane. No weight, let alone destination. Figured it would end up somewhere beautiful, like our letters to all the tooth fairies and all the stray balloons. Part of the wisdom of childhood was a refusal to accept the limitations of a body, a practice of compassion that was both open and earnest, even though we'd go home and ring doorbells that always seemed to sound like our parents screaming. We married the jump rope, simply because it made our heart beat faster. We married the hula hoop because it felt good to have something to hold on to that kept coming back. If you love something, then why don't you marry it? This is not a love story as you've heard it narrated in the past. There is no one moment, no sudden revelation. Love was something far more discreet that I found myself inside of, like a brown skin, a man's body, and a name. Sometimes even I don't know how to pronounce these symbols, not written in our own hands, but rather stuffed in our throats like prophecies we mistake as truth because they appeared to come from our own lips. This is a story of growing up, which is shorthand for saying that learning that the only thing that matters in life is falling in love and forgetting everything else along the way. So when I said I loved you, what I meant to say is, I'm sorry for using you, but that word was inevitable after you called me handsome and we exchanged numbers, secrets, and sheets. This is a programmed equation. One loneliness times another equals desperation. Approach his lips from approximately a 45-degree angle. Hold on for almost 67 seconds. Pretend like it feels like forever. Pretend like it justifies 22 years of searching. When I said I loved you, what I meant to say is I've forgotten how to believe in all of my dreams like the truth fairy, when words like fear and loneliness cemented themselves to my throat so that even though we were speaking, we couldn't actually hear one another beneath the rubble. So instead, we just kissed like they did in the movies, hoped that our tongue would remove the blockage, clung on to one another so desperately as if one body could contain all of our chaos, so that we ended up crushing underneath the weight and finally understood why they called it breaking up. If you love something, then why don't you marry it? And I am no longer a kid, which is shorthand for saying that I am only 22 and I could already tell you a couple of love stories, but they would probably sound boring because they taste just as stale as yours. Could tell you about how my colleagues have started using words like settle and down as if there is something wrong with flying. Could tell you about how my friends tell me that they are in love and happy until they are in tears and drunk, weeping in my bedroom. How we have been taught to consume what gives us joy to the point of destruction. If you love something, then why don't you marry it? Taught how to name all the good parts, but still cannot manage to name the violence. If you love something, then give it away. The reason we did not work out is because I loved you too well, clung on to you, instead of opening my heart to all of the friends and paper airplanes that surround us. So I'm trying to remember a practice of compassion, not consumption, a way of relating to the universe that is not possessive or selfish. So when I hold you, what I'm trying to do is make a collage out of all of our ligaments and lies in a way that is beautiful and not artificial, more about the persistence, like sister, mother, novel, chair, more about the regular, the boring, the scenes in between kisses, the ones we have been disciplined to ignore. So what if the most radical happiness we had was when we were 5 years old and could distinguish between love and loneliness. So what if I am breaking up with love and propositioning the whole entire world instead, to the mother who helped nurture my politics, to my friends who helped keep me accountable, to the city that refuses to let me sleep? I am sorry. I am back. I am yours again.
This is our last poem. Sometimes I dream about breaking up with you. Other times I dream about you meeting my parents. One is a dream, and the other is probably a nightmare. And sometimes they switch places. Last week, you asked me if the gift I gave you meant goodbye. At some point, I lied, but certain lies keep the world oiled. Like in the beginning, there was violence. Then the word came to smooth it over. Like babies come from the sky. Like Abraham Lincoln abolished slavery. Like nuclear disarmament. Cage-free eggs. I love you, and this isn't goodbye. After the goodbyes and lies are over, at the end of the world, we'll all drink weak tea and play truth or truth and tear each other open. The truth is, I lose often at crosswords. 4 letters, a cross, creates happiness, blank. The truth is, when other people speak of healing and happiness, ask me if I've tried yoga, I tell them I can only use a Band-Aid if I understand why I am bleeding. Does that make sense? It might not even be my blood. This is the way of things. Sometimes I panic when I look at sunsets, like I loved the skies so much I tore it open and then it bled. This is the way of things. This is how love works. The Pilgrims loved the land, so they stole it. We loved Brooklyn, so we gentrified it. Our parents loved us, and they messed us up. I learned to love my body, and then I took a needle to it. The truth is, I hope one of us gets swallowed by a whale and lives out all our years digesting its loneliness. I hope the other dies very quickly. I wish we were living in a bad opera. Maybe this is just capitalism and patriarchy speaking, or maybe it's me, afraid that we will be obsolete before my MacBook. Either way, I am asking if you will tear up the sunset with me, so we can never say that things fell apart, or that we were painfully ordinary, or that one day you rode the express train a little farther and never came back, or that one day we lived in different cities and I forgot to pick up the phone. Let's do it tonight, while the sky feels raw and your hands still know how to lock into mine for the tearing. The truth is, the story of sex is one of failure and absence, the night we made love, the years we spend unmaking it, every other night. The truth is, I have this dream where I bleed to shreds, and this nightmare where you sew me back together, and sometimes we switch places. The truth is, holding you in my arms reminds me of dying. The truth is, your whole body feels like an argument. The truth is, eventually we will tie up affection and spray-painted absence, whether for depression or plague or time and tiredness. The truth is, I will not die without you. The truth is, I am terrible at titles and worse at endings. The truth is, however radical the love is, it will sink. There will just be no papers. There will be no words at all, no meaning, no gravestone. The truth is, one day, you'll walk up to me in a crowded room and shake my hand. You'll say it was good to see me. It will be polite and clean. The truth is, a few months later, we'll have lunch in another crowded room. The end.
awkward when people do like adult things like standing up. So, we have a few minutes for question and answer. A couple of things first before we go into that. Johannes, you had an announcement?
So, hi everyone, thanks for having me make this announcement. I'm with Black and Pink, LGBTQ representation organization based in Boston.
They're rad.
And we're part of a statewide coalition of prison justice organizations working on the Jobs Not Jails campaign. So if you feel inspired to do something after all this poetry, and you want to help divert $2 billion towards, that's going towards prison construction, it's a job creation instead. We're getting petitions for that, and there's also going to be a rally on April 26th at noon at Boston Common. And if you have more questions about why prisons are a queer trans people of color issue, then ask me or ask anyone.
Is there an event page for that rally?
Yes.
We can post it in the event after. Can you post it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Great.
Also, we're selling. We have like
We have a few chat
we have
books
a couple
left.
of chapbooks, which are like microscopic poetry texts.
They're not microscopic. You can read them without a microscope.
Science girl.
Yeah.
Jeez, I was just going for the metaphor.
Okay. Science.
10. Dope.
Sorry.
10 to $20 science scale, whatever you can. Anyways, question and answer.
We're really weird if you haven't noticed, so feel free to ask us weird questions. Yeah.
I really thank you, first of all. Second of all, really.
There we go.
I just really want to know more about Sharon Poop, like the Poop Love article.
Oh
Can you pass that on somehow?
Yeah. I can. Yeah. Also, just Google fecal transplants. I think that's. Yeah, fecal transplants. Totally Google it. I also just think that, I don't know, what we were talking about before, it's part of like a more general desire to see people talk about body fluids without this like weirdness about it, right? Like,
but I didn't know other people. So me and my best friend we like tell each other when we have like good poop times, you know. And I just didn't know anybody else did that.
no, yeah.
I actually have a poem called Post-Colonial Poo.
We need to bring it back. It's one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. Anyway.
No, maybe some thoughts on poo and digestion. So I have really bad digestion. I have some really bad digestion. Like
I identify as having good digestion.
and like we don't have a politic around that yet, right? Like people with privilege are
non-identitarian form of privilege right here.
Like what the fuck? I'm so lactose intolerant that it's like, oh my god. But it can be like a form of lethal warfare at some level. Like, really? And so what I've been getting so frustrated about is like the ways in which professional culture work, right? Is that we're supposed to be at a performance or at a panel and our bodies are supposed to be like, oh, we're ready to go. What if I really need to take a shit? I want an audience where I can be like, hi everyone, I'm having really bad diarrhea, and everyone's like, oh honey, I got you, like do you need anything? Like I'm here. And we all just take 5 seconds while I go and take a shit, but we're not in that world yet, right? We have so much to fight for. And when we think about excrement has always been linked to people of color, has always been linked to queer people, has always been linked to the abject. And even though we talk about queerness as a reclamation of the abject, we never really talk about the reclamation of other substances beyond semen and blood. Like how do we talk about piss? How do we talk about shit? How do we talk about phlegm? I'm here for all of it, so.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if we scared you about shit, but not really.
If you were scared shitless. I also make puns all the time. Anyway, B for B. Yeah, I'm back.
Yeah, so I've been like following you guys on Twitter for a little bit, and I saw you guys like were talking to Sweet Park and Dean Spade a couple days ago.
Yeah.
And I want to know what was that about, because those are awesome people.
We love Suey Park and Dean Spade. Anyway, so yeah, we were talking to Suey and Dean in particular about celebrity culture and the ways that at universities and different kind of conferences and communities and stuff, people become elevated to the level of celebrity. We have been referred to as gayness before, right? Like, so these kinds of things that happen and how that is counterproductive to a lot of revolutionary movements, right? Because the most important people are the ones who don't have time to be doing that work. But then we were also thinking about it at a very practical level of like, okay, so if you're making money off of speaking, how can you give it away? Or give away parts of it, or give away parts of it that make sense to like the movements that you're trying to speak about or for. So I don't know.
There are a lot of like radical speakers who get tons of money and don't do anything with it but hang out with themselves. And that's really fucked up because what they're doing essentially is that they're exploiting the labor of social movements to profit. And so what we really were talking about is like how do we hold other speakers accountable and link them to social movement organizations so we can see it as just like going in and stealing. Robin Hood.
Robin, so look forward to more information about capital redistribution and speakers. Go for it.
So you guys just said my like buzzword was accountability, which is what I wrote down, because your poems are very much like politics and personal, and there's such a blurry line between it all, and it's beautiful. But I'm just wondering, accountability, how do you define it, and what is accountability? Tough one, sorry.
I mean, it's got several elements to it, right? Like making these the things that where you fuck up and things that you are doing transparent and publicly available and not like keeping things behind the scenes. I think for us in particular, like we were talking about in a few of our pieces, when we are engaging in discussions of state violence or violence against other people of color, not hiding under umbrella terms. I think more and more as like political affiliations become a convenient way for people to mask the ways that they're also responsible for different kinds of violence.
I think it's also about there's a way in which when we come to perform, what gets lost is like the trillions of interactions that have composed who we are. Our art is fundamentally a social art. It's a reflection of the resistance movements we're a part of. It's a reflection of the friendships, the blood families that we come from. And so for me, it's like I'm not here for artists. We're just like, I'm an artist. Like you can't engage with me in my politics, or like you can't engage with me because I'm an individual art. Like that's bullshit. Like everything is because of women of color who labored for me, right? Like, and I have to be accountable to that shit. And so for me, that looks like unities around that, and like get over this mystical like art production phenomenon and show like these are our friends, these are people we live with, these are people who know us and like see the art we're doing and troll us and like can make fun of us, and like we have people in our life who can just be like, okay, you're being a little full of yourself, cut it, and like, oh shit, you know? So it's about also friendship, I think, is one of the biggest systems of accountability that's undervalued.
Word, thank you.
I don't know what time we're at. What kind of time do we have for questions? Okay, so we can take a few more. Yeah, what's up?
I was just wondering if you could talk a little more about like the specificity of being South Asian and how you discovered that, and like what the process was for you, like going from person of color as like a growing, or sort of what you were just talking about, like Black film.
For me, I actually came from knowing that I was Indian. Like South Asian was a term that was made available to me later in life when I got a little older as a solidarity term with people from the subcontinent, from Indo-Caribbean diaspora, etc., who are not from India, right? South Asian also is like a solidarity term in a lot of ways. I guess I knew that I was Indian, and person of color was a term that was introduced to me in a like youth political organizing setting. It wasn't introduced to me as an identity, and I think I value that, and because it keeps me in check. Like, this is not an identity. This is a solidarity term that I use to, like, build resistance movements to white supremacy, recognizing that our struggles are not the same. Do you want to talk about that?
I have like a kind of awkward introduction to race stuff because like I grew up in Podunk, Texas. Like that's like write about a lot, right? Yeah, and like that poem Gray Area is really central to the way that I understand race, because like Texas is really fucked up, that's right. But like I have a lot of power to go up and be like, Texas is fucked up, I got out, I'm in New York. And there's a lot of people like me who talk about the South like that, and talk about the South as this like racist place, this homophobic place that queer people of color like flee from. But I think that there's something there about a currency of difference that's in the South that's not as much in the urban spheres, of just like difference is literally like that gay bar, you would have everyone, like all the weirdos would be in one place, and there was this sort of, it wasn't even an identitarian form of difference, it was just kind of like, we're not that, and so we're gonna get together. So I grew up with like theater kids and like punks and so for me like racial justice as a framework is something that I've like come into in my political life, but it's something that I always feel very strange about, and that's why I think it reflects maybe our different commitments. I don't want to abstract level. But I'm really interested in like things like white anti-racistship, which Jenny would just like barf at the concept of. But because like I grew up, like I said, most of my friends are white dudes, and like the ways that we were engaging in politics wasn't about that political language of people of color and whatever. It was more about accountability and what we were doing, and thinking about how we can build alternatives together. But for me, I think right now what's most interesting about some of the work Jenny and I are doing is like how South Asian people specifically have been able to profit from the term people of color in this country by saying like, oh look, we're all oppressed, but then what gets erased is the specificities of our own oppression against other countries, as Indians against other regions in South Asia, as Hindus against Muslims in South Asia, and like all those around caste violence or all these things become flattened, because what that means is that we're recentering white people in a way that we think about our politics. So one of the things we've been really trying to do is think like, what would it mean for us to decenter white people and to actually be accountable to just South Asian people, or be accountable to just people of color? And that conversation looks very different. Obviously white supremacy is a way of doing things, but then it's also erasing our own complicities.
A couple more.
How's your science fiction novel going?
Oh my god! I am struggling with it because writing a novel is really hard, especially like coming from a poetry mindset. Yeah, like one of my friends read a couple of my chapters and was like, you don't have, like, he was like, you have wrote a series of images, which is really cool, but it's very different from other things I've read. And I was like, yeah, that's because I don't really know how to write in paragraphs still, fictionally wise. But I'm enjoying the process. It's sort of on hold right now because we're just like traveling and I'm like doing too much work in life. But yeah, I'm having a lot of fun. It's mostly just because like I wanted a like queer South Asian sci-fi novel to exist in the world. So I was like, I'm just gonna do it.
Is there something wrong with it just being images? Or
Is there? No, there's nothing wrong with that. But it was. I literally am like relearning how to write paragraphs and like fill them in, not use like 2 words. And be like, that's it. That's the story. But yeah.
What's your favorite science fiction?
Nalo Hopkinson. You should all read her work. It's spelled N-A-L-O Hopkinson.
Yeah.
I think you forgot about yours.
No.
Well, thank you for talking about gentrification and women and Asians as people of color who are, we use it as a convenient term, but our experiences are very different. I'm a white South Asian, my mom is from Oregon, and my dad is white. So I guess you just had me thinking a lot about the convenience of saying you're a person of color or maybe not walking in the world as one. And I want to know what we can do as like on the spectrum of South Asian, like what we can do to have conversations and yet still move forward and not rest on convenience.
A few different things. One thing that I've been thinking about a lot more is how, I think both of us in ways have been thinking about a lot more, is like Western narratives of like both queerness and activism sort of rest on this idea that your blood family, if that's something that's available to you, necessarily has to be apart from your queerness or your like political work. But I feel like I have a 13-year-old brother, and I feel like some of my, I keep saying this, but like some of my most radical political work is making sure that he grows up to like not be an asshole, and you know, just like dismantling shit that's happening with our own youth and having conversations within our own families, and spending hours arguing with my dad about like the occupation of Kashmir, and figuring out why, you know, Hindu nationalism still exists in my family, why they have casteist attitudes, where they come from for me, like tracing those origins. And I don't know, for me, like setting boundaries and making those conversations possible within families and communities that I run through. Also like organizing with other radical South Asian people, recognizing that that community exists. So more and more it's like, I don't know, the same way that we would tell white folks to do work in your own backyard, in a way. Doing work in our own backyard to recognize that anti-Black racism and like anti-Native racism are not going to disappear in our communities unless we're the ones calling them out, right? I'm
Johnny and I also spent our summer in Palestine, which we can talk more about if you want to hear. And one of the things that we really thought a lot about, and we've written about, and is going to be coming out soon eventually, is the ways in which our understanding of white supremacy is really predicated on the US, and we have such a narrow-minded understanding of how whiteness has operated in the world, which makes no sense because my mother is white passing, and I never thought about it that way because in South Asia we always had light-skinned people, and it was like, oh, they're Indian, whatever. And this need to like simultaneously acknowledge the specificity of racism as it operates in this country around phenotype and the ways in which racism has been pitted against blackness in this country. So having lighter skin is seen as having sort of an investment or a property in whiteness. But when we think about race as a transnational phenomenon, there are still like blonde, blue-eyed refugees in Palestine, right? And how are they being erased from our rhetorics around people of color? And how do people of color still rely on these myths of phenotype as people of color that are also erasure to Native American people, like erasure to mixed race people, erasure to people from South Asia, etc. So a desire to, I think, always to remain anxious in our skin tones, right? To like name the privileges that we have, but to also call for more complex ways of understanding race beyond phenotype, understanding race to our legacies, our cultural histories, our ancestors, like these parts of ourselves that can't just show up on what we look like. But then also at the same time acknowledging that the way state violence works in this country for real is around skin tone. So how do we simultaneously acknowledge that, but then have a more complex conversation as well?
So you guys going on tour? Are you like speaking at different places right now?
I mean, we perform at different places throughout the year.
Are they mainly academic spaces, or is there a variety? Because I figured that you probably chose most of the material because we're at a school we can understand like Foucault and stuff like that. But I was wondering if like you would read a Foucault poem like in a where that discourse isn't really there, you know.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, no, it's real. I was doing some shows in different venues in DC recently that were not academic spaces, and a friend asked me to do that fisting poem, and I was like, I'll do it privately for you, but I don't think that this is gonna work, even though like some people understand it, like it's right. But yeah, we do a lot of shows in academic spaces and universities and colleges. We do other kinds of shows in, most of those other kinds of shows tend to happen in New York, because we both live there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to say that we have day jobs. Like, this isn't just what we do. So I'm a full-time organizer at the Audre Lorde Project, which is a queer and trans people of color organizing center in Brooklyn and New York.
And I am an organizer at the Queer Detainee Empowerment Project. We work with queer and HIV positive folks in detention and after they've left detention in New York. So, yeah, you should donate money to our organizations. That's why we said those things. Maybe one last question, and then we'll like chill and break, and everyone can have an evening.
And we have chapbooks.
We have chapbooks.
And we have Twitter. And we have feelings.
We have a lot of those. Yeah.
So I was wondering about, you guys talk a lot about how your like Indian culture perhaps interplays with your identities and like rediscovering ways to ground it in like family and like values that you hold, and I was wondering how you went about rediscovering those values and making sure that it didn't seem, I don't know if this is the word, but voyeuristic in a sense, because part of that will never, I guess some way that I understand it's part of it will never be ours, like our culture, since we are Indian American, or at least I'm Indian American, so how you maintain a balance between that, I guess.
The question was about the balance between, and the ruptures in some ways, between identities that we occupy, in particular as like queer and trans people, right? And Indianness and how those things get defined. I think part of the work at this point in my life is recognizing that my idea of Indianness is extremely skewed, and that my parents are Brahmin and like moved into the US and had a certain kind of ascendancy that was available to them because of their caste and education. And I feel like diaspora in general, like if we're gonna talk about refracted light, diaspora is really like a kind of refracted light, right? Like our understanding of home and homeland is just weird, and it doesn't reflect understandings of homeland that are situated in their place. Most of my like work right now is the ways that I have an analysis of like settlement and racism in the US. I'm trying to develop that around India and the ways that it's fucked up in the subcontinent also. I think that's where I'm at right now.
I have so many feelings about this, maybe we should talk about it after. But I think that one of the privileges of being a queer South Asian, a queer diasporic South Asian, is that there's a moment when we actually are able to introspect and be like, wait, the narratives around our culture that we're taught are patriarchal and heteronormative, what? And then that moment of departure where we get kicked out of our families, right, or like kicked out of cultural customs, we can actually begin to recognize how important they are to us. And Sri Moraga has written about this as well. Like for queer people of color, a lot of times we have more profound investments in family, more profound investments in like longing and belonging, because we've been kicked out in the ways that we've understood our cultures transmitted through heteronormativity. And so for me, like as a queer South Asian, when I saw like, okay, there was no other queer South Asians growing up in a small town Texas, I began to think of my South Asian identity as a political identity. So it wasn't an identification with blood family. It wasn't an identification that was based off of a shared cultural history or a religion. It was an identification that was like, I'm gonna fight like fucking hell, because my parents got out because of their class ascendancy and because of their privilege that they like fucked over shit there, and then we're not supposed to somehow deal with it because we're just diasporic people. Every single material privilege that I have is because my parents like oppressed lower caste people in India, oppressed Muslims in India, oppressed other people. So what would it mean for me to just think of my liberation in this context when everything that I am is because of their violence? So I actually decided to go back and learn and work with activists in South Asia. I was working in Bangalore. And for me, it was one of the most important moments because the connections that we're making were not facilitated through blood family, but facilitated through political solidarity. And naming myself as an ally, but I really think that like diasporic South Asians need to become allies for grassroots activists in South Asia, because we have the privilege to lobby the US state, which is the biggest imperial hub of the world, to actually do shit for our people. And there's some really great models for this. For example, in New York, I would recommend a group called South Asian Solidarity Initiative, which is really about like how do we get a South Asian American voice on South Asian issues that acknowledges the complexity of diaspora but is still politically accountable. We should probably wrap it up.
We should wrap it up.
Thank you.
Thank you everybody for coming.